Hi, I'm Eric Reifenberg, and I'm a negotiation expert. And what you're about to watch is an event that I put on where I talked about 3 common negotiation challenges that I see with my clients. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to reach out and talk to me about challenges you may be having with your negotiations or with your team's negotiations, I'd love to talk to you about it. Enjoy.
Introduction. I want to start off by saying who I'm not. I'm not a hostage negotiator. I'm not an academic. But what I am is someone who spent 15 years selling to and negotiating with some of the largest companies in the world. So I spent 15 years as either an individual contributor, just a regular salesperson, account manager, and then moving into a management role, and then ultimately a VP of global sales, where I had responsibility for Europe, Asia, and North America. So in that time, I had a lot of negotiation experiences. And fortunately, I started working at a company called Emerson Electric, and they trained us when I first started there. So early in my career, I had really good negotiations training, and I had a chance to use it. And I had a lot of failures, so a lot of mistakes, lost a lot of deals, but I also had some really good successes and won some deals and learned a lot along the way. So about 6 years ago, I decided to start teaching what I've learned. And my whole approach and the approach of this presentation is really what I have found works in the real world. And I just want to give you some principles, and I want to give you some concepts so you have a way to think about negotiations. And then you're going to need to really adapt it to what works for you. Okay, so that's where I want to start from. Also, there's one underlying assumption. And the underlying assumption is that you're dealing with a rational person on the other side. So all the negotiation books you've read, all the theory you've heard, this all assumes we're dealing with a rational person. And most of us here on this call know in the real world, we're not always rational. We're not always doing what it takes to maximize value for ourselves and for both parties. And we let emotions get in the way. So we have to recognize that. And I would like to encourage everybody, when you're getting involved in negotiations with another party, and I'm talking about B2B negotiations, make sure you're developing some empathy for your counterpart. Make sure you're spending a lot of time getting to know their situation and really listening to them so that you can stand in their shoes. And this is going to go a long way towards helping you use the material we're going to talk about today and these general principles, because if your counterparty's not rational, then it's going to be really hard. Okay, so that's the underlying assumption, is that we're dealing with rational parties. So the 3 challenges we're going to talk about today is, number 1, I see people missing out on high value trades all the time. They don't take the opportunity to trade for things, and they make mistakes like making unnecessary concessions when they don't have to. They are so focused on getting the best deal they can for themselves. They don't recognize and understand what their counterparty needs and realize they can actually trade for it. So we're going to get into that discussion. Secondly, another common challenge we see is people not maximizing the deal from the start, not having the appropriate starting point for the negotiation. So there's an opportunity early on for you to psychologically anchor your counterparty on where you want to be. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the psychology, and we're going to talk about, how we anchor effectively and what I've seen in the role plays I do in my class. Last is understanding what your true source of negotiating power is, and really understanding that. And I'll be willing to bet that most of you understand what your power is, but you don't spend enough time understanding what your counterparty's power is. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on that as we get into that section. So those are the 3 concepts we're going to talk about today. So what I'd like to do, I want to start off with a poll question. So let me give you a setup. So the setup's as follows. You're up against a difficult, competitive negotiator. So for those of you who've got the cameras on, do you know what it's like to negotiate with a really difficult person? Have you had that feeling? Raise your hand. Yeah, sucks, right? It's like dealing with a bully. So you're up against a difficult, competitive negotiator. Do you consider it better to give something that you don't care about at all? I mean, it's meaningless to you early in the negotiation to get some goodwill, to get some type of traction started in the negotiation. Would you be willing to do that? Yes or no? Let me start the poll question here. Okay. And if you won't mind, please fill that in. All right, we've got about 20 more people to fill this out, so please go ahead and do that. We're getting close. Got about 9 more of you. So what we're doing is filling out a poll question. If you just step back to your computer, would you be willing to give something away that means nothing to you early in the negotiation to gain goodwill? All right, we're going to give you about 10 more seconds. If you haven't filled it out, you got 45 of 53 people. Oh, one more. All right, we're going to stop it now. Let me share the results with you. So can everybody see the results? Hands up, anybody? Yeah, awesome, thanks. So it's almost an even split. Now, several of you in this call, I notice, have taken my negotiation class before, so you have a little bit of a leg up on this question. But what I'd like to do is, if someone could, you can raise your hand, by the way, with this application, or yeah, I'm not sure exactly where that is, but you should be able to raise your hand. I'd like to know why you answered the way you answered. So anybody who said yes, would you be willing to volunteer and share with the group why you said yes? And raise your hand and I'll call on you. Joel?
I said yes, based on the question that you asked to gain goodwill.
Yeah.
That was the qualifier. That's the only reason I put yes. If you said of little value, the end, I would have said no.
Okay. So why would you have said, like, why did you make that fine distinction? Is goodwill important in your business, or has it been in your career?
Of course.
Have you been able to cash that in?
Oh, absolutely. But it's got to be, it has to be transparent. I mean, you can't just give something that has no value to a person that recognizes it has no value. I don't know how you gain goodwill if the person doesn't recognize value in it, but I'm just going strictly by your question.
Yeah, good. Joel, thanks for sharing. Who else said yes? I'd like to chime in. Who else did I miss? And you can just go off mute and start talking, because I can't see every tile. There's too many of you. All right. Did anybody say no that would like to give their answer? Don't be shy now. There's only 53 of us. Tim.
The reason I answered no was that I felt like going into a negotiation with someone I know is a bully and a tough negotiator.
Yeah.
They already have an idea of what things I value. So for me to give up something of little or no value, I don't really think that that's going to move the needle at all as far as goodwill goes.
Yeah. I mean, what's it like if you give a bully, or, you know, a difficult competitive negotiator, if you give them something, what's the next step?
They're going to ask for another. They're just going to keep pushing in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. I'm just trying to get the discussion going so we can think through, because it's all about how you think it through, not what the ultimate answer is. But I like that, Tim. I agree with you. It's really dangerous if you're dealing with someone who's overly competitive. And anybody on this call who's in sales might know what it's like to deal with a really competitive person. Okay, great. Anybody else? A yes or no? Just take yourself off.
So I said no, because I think if you start by giving away something, you're showing a level of desperation or weakness, which they will be taking advantage of. later. So it's better to negotiate from a point of strength.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is maybe you're holding your cards a little close to your vest early in the negotiation.
Yeah, maybe giving away your position.
Yeah. So, okay. I totally understand that. It's a good way to think about it. So what I would like you all to think about, and I like what, Joel said that he has done that. One thing I didn't hear anybody say, which is, what does that one thing that you're giving away that means nothing to you, what does it mean to the other side? Because if it means nothing to them, I think to Joel's point, well, then, doesn't mean anything. It's why give it away if they don't care for it? But if they really value it and you give it away early in your negotiation, you're going to lose leverage for the future, right? And what happens if you give away their most important negotiable? I mean, the one thing that they've decided they need to get out of this negotiation. Are they going to be motivated to continue to negotiate with you if you've given what they want already? So that's the danger. Now, I'm not saying, because I've done some classes in China and everybody's telling me, hey, look, in China, it's cultural to give something away early, to build the guanxi, the relationship. But what I'm saying to you is, if you're going to give something away early in the negotiation that means nothing to you, you should be absolutely clear on what it means to them. Because if you give away the big thing early, they're no longer going to be interested in negotiating with you, and you're not going to be able to make a trade later. So just get clear on that. And then I also like the comment about, if we give a bully something, of course, they're going to ask for more. So we got to be careful. Now, if we're dealing with a highly collaborative negotiator, and I would be willing to bet most of you in B2B transactions on this call are dealing with highly collaborative business partners that you do business with over and over. Well, it's not as dangerous then, right? Because you're more likely to have a relationship, you're more likely to have empathy for them, and you know what they value, and they're probably willing to make some trades. In other words, they may be willing to give you something they don't care about in exchange for something you do. So you may have this equivalent exchange of values. So that is something I have seen as a real sticking point with people who have taken my negotiations class, or people that have worked with me in sales, is they end up giving something away early, or asking for a discount early, or looking for extended terms early, before they truly have done the discovery necessary to understand what it is we're trading for and what does the other side want and why do they want it. So yeah, I hope that was valuable to you to hear that. So thanks for your participation, everybody. I'm going to give you an example. So I've got a client who makes precision gears. And to make these precision gears, they have a very high-end CNC machine that they use to grind the gears to very precise levels. And, it's a family-run business. These two, so the gentleman who owns the business, him and his wife own the business. He took over the business from his father in the late 50s when his father passed away. And he ended up inheriting the business when he was really young. And, it's his life's work. I mean, this is his life's work, is building this company up. And it is really one of the most beautiful, clean, efficient, mechanical machine shops you've ever seen. And when you go to visit him, he is more than happy to take you on a tour of his facility. And in particular, he'll show you this machine they have that grinds these gears for like aerospace and medical to these really extreme tolerances. And the company that manufactures the machine for years, for like 10 years, has been sending their prospects, their potential clients, to his shop to see what the machine does in action. So one of the things we uncovered when I was helping them prepare for a negotiation is that, we've been giving away, they have been giving away this tour, this demo of the machine that's made in Germany, okay, for nothing, which is fine. But now they're up against this, they're trying to buy more equipment from this company. And, the one card that we discovered they really had as far as leverage was they could stop those demo tours, because these demo tours are probably worth millions of dollars in sales every year for this company, because you have one of your clients promoting it for you. So can you imagine the benefit to this German CNC manufacturer by just being able to send their potential clients to the Midwest to see the machine in action for someone who's just going to gush about it and show you how great it is, because they like showing off their facility and they're not recognizing they're giving us something away that is of little value to them, but such incredible value to that manufacturer. So that's an example I've seen with one of my clients. So what I'd like to challenge you, are you giving away things? Let's talk about, are we giving away maybe installation services? Are we giving away integration services of maybe our software or hardware into our clients' platforms? Are we giving away, what kind of services are you giving away to your clients because you just been doing it for a long time, you don't recognize it, where instead you could trade? So for example, maybe there's some type of fee you want to charge up front to integrate the back end of your software or your software into the back end of your customer systems, but you do it for free all the time. Well, even though if you know you're going to do it for free and you know the market's not going to pay for it, it doesn't mean you can't ask up front for a charge and then trade that charge away for something that you want. Okay, even though you know you're never going to get the fee, you can still ask for it up front and then make a concession, but ask for something in return of that concession. I have a client that does it all the time. They don't charge for an implementation fee for their clients to get connected to their software because they're like, Eric, we've been giving away for so long, no one's going to pay it. Yeah, but if you put that in every proposal from now on that you have an implementation charge, you could always give it back away for nothing, but you may be able to get something in return. And so that's what we want you thinking of, these high value trades. What are we inadvertently giving away because they don't mean that much to us? They're easy for us to give, but maybe they mean a lot for the person we're negotiating with. Okay. So so Cherie brought up something good on the chat window here. I'd like you to put questions in the chat window. So just put a Q and then write your question. And when we get to the end, I'll be addressing some of the questions you might have. So if you want clarification on something, let me know. All right. So yeah, what high value trades are you giving away? Be careful about that. Or what high value trades is your team giving away that they could trade and ask for they could give a concession and ask for something in reciprocation for. Okay. Okay. Point number 2, not maximizing deals from the start. And really what I'm talking about is psychologically anchoring your negotiations. Before I get into that, I just want to go quickly into a little brain science. So your brain is made up of your total body weight, your brain makes up 2% of it. So not a lot. But your brain consumes 20% of your calories. And this is why when you're doing an intense mental activity, you get hungry. This is why when you're in a long, protracted, dragged out negotiation, you tend to get really tired and exhausted because that brain is chewing up calories like you can't believe. All right. We human beings evolved to be calorie hoarders. Like we don't want to expend any additional calories if we don't have to. We evolved that way. So we want to avoid as much potential to consume calories as possible just for our own self-preservation. I recognize in today's society that it doesn't matter. All of you are probably within 20 or 30 feet of a food source, so we're good. But their hardware, your body's still operating that way. And because of that, we do things and we make mental shortcuts in our lives that will reduce our cognitive load. One of the mental shortcuts that all of you are guilty of inadvertently is that you're taking the first piece of information you hear and you're giving it too much weight. And I want you to think about that. How often have you read an article, watched a video, gotten some information from someone and been tricked into making that true without doing appropriate research? This happens to me often and I catch myself. And the reason why this is happening is because we don't want to go through the psychological or the mental burden to all the brain power it takes to really find out what the truth is. So this is a shortcut we're all guilty of. We don't do it all the time. It doesn't happen to your counterparty all the time, but it happens often enough that you need to be aware of this. Okay. And what that means is if you're in a negotiation and you have good information, you should go first. you should be the first person to put an offer forward. I know there's a lot of debate about who should go first. Someone last week in one of my classes said, well, isn't the person who goes first the one who loses? No. So a lot of you on this call are salespeople. You have much more information about the product or service you're selling than your buyer does, for the most part. There are exceptions. If you're selling hardware, your customer might do a teardown analysis on the hardware that you're selling them, and they might be able to figure out over time what it actually costs you to build it and decide what they think a appropriate markup is in the industry, what your labor transformation costs are depending on the country, how big your organization is, and they may dictate to you go first and tell you what you should be selling it to them at. But that's not what usually happens. Usually buyers ask a variety of sellers to give them proposals or bids, and they weigh those against each other. But you should always go first in your negotiation so that you can psychologically anchor the negotiation and set that shortcut in motion of your counterparty giving that more weight than they should. Okay? And if you can't go first because you don't have great information, that's okay. I want you to think very carefully about what your counter anchor is going to be. What are you going to do with the person who's psychologically anchoring you on a price, a term, a service level, whatever it is? Or what I'm really saying is anchoring you on a story, because all those things are just stories, right? Okay. 83%. I have a very simple role play I do in my class where I have two individuals negotiate with each other over price. So they're just haggling on a one-dimensional negotiation on price. So I think in 2018, I collected responses from everybody for the entire year who did this role play on a spreadsheet. And I looked at what the data was telling me. And what it told me was 83% of the time, negotiators fell halfway between their opening positions. The other thing that happened was maybe someone would negotiate against themselves. So maybe someone gives an offer and that person says, you know, that's not good enough. You need to sharpen your pencil. Give me another offer. And they would be guilty of giving another number without asking for one in return. So they're negotiating against themselves. That happened. The other thing that happened was people would say, give an offer, and the other person would accept it immediately because it was such a great offer. That almost never happens in your real lives, in your jobs. And if it does happen, it never happens again because you screwed up. So what that means in the real world, you most likely would end up halfway between your opening positions, or you're going to end up negotiating against yourself. So that 83% actually goes higher. Okay, so if it's true that we're going to end up halfway between our opening positions, can we all agree it is extremely important where you start off and who goes first? That anchoring effect, when you know you're going to be halfway. So think about this. If one party starts at a value and there's a value you want to get to, you better figure out the difference and then go the other direction, the same difference, if that makes sense. So if the seller said $12 and you know you need to be, they said 18 and you know you need to be at $12, as the buyer, you better start at 6 because that's halfway between your opening positions. So start thinking much more rationally about what your counter offer is going to be when someone anchors you. And if you're the seller or the person going first, think very carefully about where you start. It's going to dictate heavily where you end up. And I'll give you a quick example. So in this role play, someone will be buying a painting. And I'll have one person, a seller, say, I'll sell this to you at $800. And then the buyer will say, how about $300? And they'll go back and forth from there. I'll have the exact same scenario. Someone says, hey, how about $2,500? Their counterparty will start maybe at $800 because they don't want to offend the other person by going so low. So why did the counter offer in one case start, say, $300 versus $800? It was because the person who went first psychologically anchored where the negotiation can start. This is a painting, there's no real market value on a painting, so it's very ambiguous, but it really demonstrates how we can impact the other party's counteroffer by where we start. So think carefully about that. And if you're going to make an opening offer, I want you to think about, how do you make a really strong opening offer, that anchoring position? And I want you to be ambitious. One of the problems I see with a lot of sales organizations is they'll have a manager, they'll have a product management group, they'll have finance, they'll have somebody in the company who dictates what the price of something is, what you're going to put in your proposal, what you're going to put in your quote. Correct? For the most part. Not every organization, but we certainly had that at Emerson. And the salesperson will take that number, whether it's the schedule, the payment terms, the price, whatever it is, and they will literally bring that to the buyer in a document via email. It's going to be email, right? Let's just be honest. We don't deliver things by hand. The problem with that is they didn't ask for more. So what happens? That salesperson is forced now to go back to management if things don't go well and ask for a discount, ask for the terms to be changed. Instead of starting off from a more ambitious position, not the walkaway position, but from a more ambitious position, so they have the ability to negotiate on the fly in real time with their counterparty. When you can negotiate on the fly with your counterparty, now you're seen as a real player and they want to deal with you. But if you're a buyer and you're dealing with a salesperson, and that salesperson gives you an offer and you tell them this is unacceptable, you can't take it, and they say, well, okay, thank you, I'm going to go back to management, and they just come back begging for discounts. Where's the value? Where's the value add for the salesperson? It's not there. So I'm sure many of you have had this problem in your organizations. We need them to be more ambitious. Not stupid, just ambitious. Secondly, we want to see confidence. These offers, your anchoring position needs to be delivered with confidence. So that means don't give ranges. Because if you give a range, if you're a seller, your counterparty is going to hear the lowest number. They are not going to hear the highest number. It doesn't make you look confident if you're giving a range. Second thing I see, if you're giving an offer, I assume you've done your homework. I assume that you're satisfying your counterparty's needs, that you're giving them something that's going to fix whatever their problem is, solve the business need they're looking to solve. You don't need to pile on and start talking immediately. And you know what I'm talking about. Junior sales people do this all the time. They give an offer and they just start filling in the dead space about, this is what this, our product, our offer does. And, and this is what it's going to solve. And gosh, maybe I can talk to my boss and get you a discount, or, maybe this isn't the price. They cannot live in that tension. That brings me to my next point. Silence is powerful. Once you give your anchoring position, shut up. I had this happen to me. I went with a colleague to Finland to negotiate with Nokia. And we went in there and they were sitting across the table from us. So I'm American. I was living in Austria at the time. We get in there. They didn't talk for like 2 or 3 minutes. Like seriously, they didn't say a word. And in my head, I came completely unglued. Okay. I could not deal with the silence. And I was thinking, in this negotiation, there's no way I'm going to be able to survive and do a good job here. Secondly, I also have a client, she's a buyer, and she put out an RFQ to their suppliers. They were buying something they were manufacturing actually a food product. They were looking for ingredients. She put the RFQ out, and then she went away for 7 days. She didn't look at her email. She had something she had to do. She came back 7 days later, and of the 3 suppliers she asked for an RFQ, one of the suppliers negotiated against themselves twice because they weren't getting attention, because the other side wasn't sharing information with them. They lowered their price via email twice. So they were not confident in their opening position. So we could go, if we were a smaller group together, we could go all day on this topic of examples of people not being confident. But confidence is really important if you're going to make that ambitious opening offer. And then the last part, as I said before, is being justifiable, not being stupid, right? We can't, you all know your business, you know your market. You're not going to put an offer out that's absurd. Now, in negotiation training class, a lot of people like to take this to the nth degree and be absurd with their offers just to see what happens. And I can tell you, it never works out. Okay. If you are too ambitious and not justifiable, you end up backpedaling the entire negotiation, trying to win back over your credibility with your counterparty. One last piece. So we're talking about you anchoring. If your counterparty anchors, and you know for a fact you cannot accept that, you need to let them know. You cannot allow them to believe that their position is going to sit. I'm not saying you have to interrupt them when they're giving you either offer or counter offer. You just have to be clear and let them know. We don't want to get in a situation where your counterparty believes you have tacitly accepted something. So we're going to pull the anchor up. Okay. And you'll have to do it in a way that's very professional and clear. Number 3. Common challenge I see is not understanding where you derive your true sense of negotiating power. You know, we don't want to negotiate just on power alone. We want to trade. We want to have a win-win. We want to have a value maximized negotiation. You know, but sometimes our counterparty won't let us do that. They're going to be overly highly competitive with us. And we need to understand where our power lies so that we don't start making unnecessary concessions we don't need to make. Okay. So that is, and this is this is not my term. This is, if anybody read Getting to Yes or Getting Past No from the Harvard researchers, is BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is your source of underlying power in a negotiation. What you will do if you don't reach agreement with your counterparty. If you're in sales, it's your pipeline. If you're in procurement, it's having multiple suppliers who all have similar capabilities so that you can put them into a competitive process. Very important. And I would argue that just about everybody on this call has a really good sense of what their BATNA position is, what their relative power is. And that's great. And if you don't have a strong alternative to reaching an agreement, you need to be developing that as quickly as possible before you get to the point where you have to finalize your negotiation. So before going into the negotiation, you need to make sure that you've established and developed a BATNA. Now, you can, of course, bluff. But what happens if you get caught bluffing? You could be screwed. So you got to be careful about that. Okay. And we don't want you being economical in the truth, to coin a phrase I heard from someone I know. All right. So we're clear that your BATNA, you know that. What is their BATNA position? What will they do? What will your customer, what will your supplier do if you don't reach agreement with them? What is their source of power? This is the gap I see. People in procurement, people in sales are not doing the proper discovery and really finding out what their counterparty will do. And let's face it, if you're in a B2B sales role and you're working with procurement, they're not going to tell you this, right? We need to go around procurement, and procurement needs to go around sales. We need to go to other stakeholders in the organization, and we need to find out. And maybe it's not you. Maybe it's someone on your team who's doing this going around. You know, one of the biggest challenges that companies have, the bigger the company, the bigger the challenge, it's that you're leaking information everywhere. Your sales organization is talking when they shouldn't be. Your HR department is talking when they shouldn't be. Your engineers don't even recognize they're giving away information because it's just sharing technical data. I love that when I was in a sales role, going to my client's engineering organization and finding out what's happening with my competitors. So even if you are the procurement person or you are the salesperson and you're kind of getting, you're not, you're being very holding cards close to your chest, not sharing with each other people in your organization can be agents to help you get this information. Okay. So I think most of you know that, but I don't see most people actually doing anything with it, particularly procurement. Procurement is not spending enough time understanding what their suppliers will do if they don't reach agreement. Okay. So once again, develop your BATNA position, but really dig in and find out what your counterparty is going to do. And along those lines, I've had the experience personally when I was a sales manager of having my sales team coming back saying, we have to discount, we have to give better terms, we have to do this because our customer, the customer we've had for a long time, is going to leave us because they're getting a better offer from our competitor. You've all seen that. Anybody in sales has seen that in your career, okay? But what they're not doing, I think people do a really bad job at, is determining what are the switching costs. If you're the incumbent, you do not need to match the offer of the company that's trying to take your business. So spend some time and actually calculate what that switching cost is. I was in hardware business most of my career, so it was very easy for me to do that. I could determine how much engineering hours it would take, how much it would take for certain certifications, and we could kind of bake that number and then figure out on the piece part price how much room we had where we could not lower our price and retain the business. But there's change management. If you're a logistics company and you're selling to a very large organization, you're handling all their logistics, it's really hard for them to make that change because they have to change every single relationship that they have with you within all of their operations, all their manufacturing facilities, all their logistics people. So there's change management switching cost. It's hard to put a number to, but it's sticky. Relationships, trust. You build trust in relationships with your customers and with your suppliers. To sever that is difficult. In my negotiations training class, when I have procurement people, I always ask them, are you willing to leave your suppliers on a lower price? And I would say 99.9% of the time, they're like, hell no. We don't want to leave our suppliers because finding them was a pain in the rear. So there's this relationship trust issue. As I said before, there's certifications, especially if you're selling a physical product. Many physical products need, UL or FDA or CE marks on them. So these certifications take a long time. Process change. We're going to change the process in the way we work because we're bringing in maybe a new software system, a new vendor who helps us with not a product, but a service. There's always the risk of quality. Do your customers have the resources to supplant you? Can they really dedicate the time to qualify someone else? Be realistic about that. And then there's intangible, right? This idea of service. So I think most people have heard this saying, like, customers who leave you on price will come back to you for service. Customers who leave you on service will never come back to you. I think it's a great adage. So be realistic about what your switching costs are when you're establishing what your BATNA position is and what their BATNA position is. We're going to use your BATNA to determine your walkaway position. That's how you're going to use it. So if you have a lot of options, so if you were in sales and you have a very full pipeline, you have a lot of opportunities, the funnel's full, you're going to establish a very aggressive or high walkaway position. You're not going to accept a bad deal because you have alternatives. Now, once your team establishes what their walkaway position is, you're going to be able to gauge how aggressive or ambitious you can be in your anchoring position. If your counterparty has a lot of options, can do business with a lot of people, and have stripped out all the value and found, a group of suppliers who can provide equivalent products at equivalent levels of quality and at the same delivery rate, all that kind of stuff, your anchoring position is going to be a lot less ambitious. You're going to have to be very careful because they have the ability to go somewhere else. But if their best alternative to reaching an agreement with you is subpar, you can be very ambitious as long as it's justifiable. So that's how we're going to use BATNA. So to summarize, 3 negotiation challenges I see. Number 1, missing out on high value trades. Why? Because we're totally focused on ourselves. We're thinking about what we want. We're thinking about what we're giving away, and we're not spending the time in our diligence process and really clearly understanding what the value of things are for our counterparty. So we don't make intelligent trades. We give things away on accident instead of trading them. Secondly, we don't maximize deals from the start because we don't go first. We don't behave ambitiously because, once we do the analysis on BATNA, we don't behave ambitiously. And, we don't deliver offers with confidence. That's particularly true when we're earlier or newer in our career. So if you are managing people who are earlier in their career, you need to coach them up on being more confident, quiet, silent when they're negotiating. And then lastly, understanding your true source of negotiating power, which is what you'll do if you don't reach agreement. But much more important is what will they do if they don't reach agreement with you? And be realistic about the switching cost if you're an incumbent. You don't need to make unnecessary concessions. I see too many people in sales doing that. So we're going to open this up to Q&A in a minute. If you have any questions, please type it into the chat window. If you would like to join a negotiation training class, and some things we didn't talk about today is the process that we use to prepare for negotiations. That's where all the value is created. Please join our negotiations class. We've got a link on the window. And if you're a larger organization and you'd like to talk about having me come in and create something that's more customized for your organization, love to do it. So with that said, the sales pitch out of the way, are there any questions? And please put them in the chat window. Through here. Cherie, do we have anything?
Hi there, Eric. No, not right now. So yeah,
Okay.
guys, go ahead. Write down your questions.
And if you don't have any, then we can let you go and get back to business. All right.
Well, Eric, another alternative is, hey, if anyone wants to put their hand up and just ask you directly, go for it.
Absolutely.
And unmute yourself. Let's have a dialogue.
What the lady said.
Hi, this is Ralph, and a couple things one thing that I've run into over the years, been in business now for just over 21 years in telecommunications. And almost always we have to do an assessment before we go in there and actually give a quote. And so early on, we were doing the assessment at no charge. Well, after a while, it didn't take long before we figured out, okay, they're just taking our information and using it for their benefit. Since then, we made it mandatory all the time.
Yeah. In
the last few years, it was kind of like on and off again. And I worked for a while trying to gauge the client.
Yeah.
But lately, it's not been working well. With kind of like you try to gauge them on the conversation. Then when you go in person, it's one thing, and then you try to go back, and they negate on what they agreed on because there was nothing signed for, right?
Yeah.
I always make it, when I tell them, okay, you got to pay for this up front, and it's paid for right there when I'm on site. And sometimes got a little sidetracked, forgot about it. And so now I'm not on site. So what can you do? You end up biting the bullet.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't value it, they're not going to value it for sure. One of the things you could do is charge them for the assessment up front, right? Like you said, you have, and offer to give them that money back to them as credit and whatever service or business they're going to do with you. So there's no risk to them. You're just making sure they're a legit customer and qualifying them that way. And I think we can all agree you can't do business with everybody, and there are people who take advantage of you. So that's a good way to potentially stop that behavior.
Yeah, the old adage I've heard, you got to get them to put skin in the game, and if they do, then they're more likely to be serious about business and not just see what you can get for nothing.
Yeah, and if you give me something that's of value for nothing, I'm going to take it all day long. And if they don't value it, then they're probably not going to do business with you anyways, correct?
That's correct.
So that's your qual process. Thanks, Ralph, for sharing. Anybody else? No one wants to speak up, huh? Just me. All right.
Eric, this is Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Kevin.
I have a question on, and maybe you have some maybe metrics or data from past experiences. What we find is sometimes we fall in the trap on some of our negotiations where we're busy putting together the estimate, we're busy putting together the proposal, busy putting together the post-proposal presentation, and you get caught up in all that activity. And as a result, what often gets compromised is preparation for the negotiation. And of course, in those instances when we've done a better job preparing for the negotiation, anecdotally, I can say that we do better, and for a whole variety of reasons, including some of the points that you brought up in today's discussion. But I'm wondering from a body of work and what you've seen out there, are there metrics on, there's an average % increase in negotiation outcomes for those teams that do a better job preparing for it, take the time in advance to maybe develop a trading plan and get into a better understanding of the value of certain points from the seller's perspective and the buyer's perspective? Can you share some thoughts on the specific value of preparation?
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because your team's been trained and you've been able to see the difference. So, you see it all the time. So I see most of it's anecdotal, right? So the clients I work with, we follow up after training and ask them, be specific about, the deals you've been involved in and what benefits you've gotten and what have you used. So these anecdotal examples, we're seeing 10, 15, up to 50 times return on investment from training. But I don't have any really great data on that because this isn't something that people self-report. So that's difficult, but certainly, anybody who's here who has who's wung it during a negotiation, opposed to maybe spending considerable amount of time thinking it through and coming up with a strategy and a plan, has done much better. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I wish I had something really concrete to share with you, but it's usually anecdotal.
Well, and I'll follow it up with, a question on, we have a pretty good idea of the amount of time that we've spent rather in preparation when we take the time out to do the preparation. But I was curious to see, what do you think? And I realize every deal is different and there's complexities associated with each unique situation, but how much time is enough time to prepare for it? And how much, if we looked at it and said, look, we're gonna institute as a step in our process, X amount of hours or X amount of days that will be put in the process so that we block out time to prepare for a negotiation. What do you think that approximate amount of time should be?
Yeah, great question. So the rule of thumb is you want us, for every hour you're going to negotiate or every unit of time you're going to negotiate, you should spend 2 to 3 times in preparation. And, for some people, you might think, wow, that's an awful lot of time. But as soon as we bring in that whole idea of discovery, that idea that we just associate with sales only and not with negotiations, it becomes clear that it's easy to burn up 2 to 3 times when we start talking about discovery of understanding someone's BATNA, what's important to them, in what order something's important to them, so we can start making effective trades. And then like ground truthing that information. Just because one person at your counterparty tells you something doesn't mean it's true. You maybe need a few other sources of information to ground truth that, and that burns up a lot of time. So Kevin, what is your team finding the same thing, that like this whole discovery process is just a time killer? I mean, besides the mechanics of making a trading plan and stuff.
Yeah, you know, I think what we find is just that if we go about it, you know, there is a commitment to it, and it's just trying to balance the time commitment up front with the benefits that we do see downstream.
Yeah.
But some of it is just everyday life. You're trying to run towards the finish line.
Yeah.
And it's trying to cram in time for this preparation that I think is important, and definitely has shown value in our activities.
Yeah, and you know, I just want to add one thing onto that. I'm glad you brought this topic up. We all have transactional negotiations, and we have like the real high value strategic negotiations in our business. We all have that one or two deals that if we got it, it would transform our business. That's where we're spending the time. Our transactional, you know, really quick, a lot of you have negotiations with people where you're getting clients through a funnel, you're getting them on a demo call, and you're trying to convert to a sale pretty quickly. You know, we're not going to have a tremendous amount of time to prepare. So we want people to have a mental model so they can, you know, seize the moment and negotiate well. But, you know, for what Kevin was talking about with his business, they're doing larger, more strategic deals that are very high dollars. Those we want to really put the time and put the reps in. So there's a distinction. I recognize some of you are like, you know, our deals are all transactional. We're not spending that much time. And I understand. So, okay, we've got a question up here from Greg. If you go first in a high value negotiation, don't you risk leaving money on the table if the buyer is thinking of a much higher anchor? So in private equity, we buy and sell companies, and going first is not always the way the firm likes to negotiate. Good point. Good point. So this makes that whole discovery process that much more important. So if we're doing something that's, I mean, if we're buying or selling a company, these are big dollars, and we're impacting a lot of lives, right? So, and if we get it wrong, especially if the economy changes one way or another, we could get in real trouble and then spend a lot of time digging ourselves out of a hole. So I would say, you know, the answer to that, in my opinion, is you really need to do much more discovery and find out what the correct entry point is from your counterparty, you know, what that will be. And if you don't, and you can't get that kind of information and you're just stuck, you might ask and allow them to go first, but you got to be prepared to quickly pull that anchor up and redirect and psychologically re-anchor the negotiation on where you need to be if it's out of line. So great question. Anybody else?
I seem to recall talking about confidence. So guys, there are 41 of you left, and any good skilled negotiator needs to have confidence and brave enough to ask questions. So before we close up, go ahead and ask your last question.
Right. Well, if you have any questions that come up later, if there's something in this presentation you thought was really interesting and you want to have a discussion on it, my contact information is up here. You can call me. If I'm available, I'll pick up. You can always go to the website and I'll be happy to chat with you about it. I love this topic and I can spend hours talking about it. So I'm a resource available to anybody who wants it. So if there's, well, I got a couple of messages down here. Let's see. Oh, no, that's you, Sheree. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining. I hope you got something out of it. And if you need my help in any way, please reach out. Thank you very much and have a great day.